Hello, YouTube. This is Mike. All right, so I thought I'd check in with the channel just briefly. I was looking at comments and I was responding to comments, and I'm realizing that my responses are kind of snarky. That's not new for me. I can be snarky. Um, So first, I want to apologize to Steve there. Steve left a comment. He asked actually a pretty good question, and I responded snarkily to him. But his question was, let's see, where was it? He says, I still don't get how my ex-BPD had a relationship with her husband for 15 years and have 2 kids. Why did it take her that long to discard him? So I responded with, how is that information going to help you? The normal thing, kind of in the vein of what I'm going to say in the rest of these comments, which is, the only thing that matters is, you focusing on yourself and healing yourself. However, there is a dynamic that I've seen, which again is just my perception, but the dynamic that I've seen is that with a borderline, if they're with somebody who is, the more narcissistic the other person is, the longer they will stay in the relationship. And that is because what triggers a borderline to discard is the intimacy. So they come into it wanting intimacy and seeking intimacy and seducing you to release your intimacy with them. That is consciously what they want. But it's also the very same thing that's going to get them to discard you. The more intimate, emotionally vulnerable you are, the faster they will discard you. So they are attracted to, in my experience, 2 extremes. They're attracted to very narcissistic, full-on people with narcissistic personality disorder, or they're strongly attracted to people with very deep codependent issues. So, in my experience, narcissists, borderlines, and codependents are on a spectrum. And on one end of the spectrum, you have the narcissist. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have the codependent. And in the middle, you have the borderline. And in between the narcissist and the borderline, there is this invisible barrier. And on the other side of the barrier is the straight, normal codependent. So that barrier is the barrier between, the barrier between psychopathy and neurosis. So psychosis and neurosis. So somebody who's in the psychosis side is somebody who has the personality disorder, the actual mental illness. And so they don't have an identity, they dissociate, they don't have a clear understanding of the passage of time, they don't identify with their past actions. Every day that they go to sleep, it's like Groundhog Day. They wake up and they're, a different person, doing things all over again. So that's the mental illness part of it. Borderlines and narcissists share that. On the other side, sometimes just right smack on, just barely on the other side of that doorway is neurosis, and the codependent will be there. So as I've heard people say, the borderline is a failed narcissist. I like that. It means that they weren't able to fully create the firewall, the psychological firewall. Narcissists are constantly giving out the fantasy that they're perfect. There's nothing wrong with them. They have zero faults, they have zero vulnerabilities, and if you don't worship them that way, then they have to destroy you. They have to destroy you anyway, but the borderline bounces back and forth. That's why, you know, they're hidden psychopaths, because they're basically very similar to people who have dissociative identity disorder. There's two personalities in there. One is the protective psychopath, and the other one is the vulnerable, all-loving, sweet, beautiful borderline. So they vacillate between the two because they're incapable of maintaining the firewall. So the delusion that we have, the illusion, is that their soft, vulnerable side is the real part of them, when not. Both of those aspects are personalities. They're not the real person. So that's the delusion. We think that we're with the sweet, loving, beautiful borderline. We think we're with the real person. And then this foreign psychopath comes in later and discards you, and it's not. That's not how it works. So the way that the borderline can be stimulated to stay in that loving, sweet borderline aspect is if they're denied any intimacy. So it puts them on this hamster wheel where they're constantly chasing after the intimacy that they never get. It reminds them of their experience with their parents, and so they stay in that longer. But eventually, in my experience, what they do end up accomplishing is that at some point they become so indispensable to the narcissist, and their codependence is just raging to make sure that they meet the narcissist's need for narcissistic supply, that eventually the narcissist will start to open up and show some vulnerability. The moment that happens, they go in with a crowbar, they open them wide open and just feast on them and then discard them. So everybody gets discarded by the borderline. So why would somebody stay? So it means that very likely, I mean, I don't know, but if I had to guess, it was that the person that she was with for 15 years was probably a narcissist, and you weren't. You were a codependent, and you showed vulnerability. You gave them what they wanted. You gave them the love and the intimacy, and that's why they discarded you. But, you know, I still, although I kind of, I regret the snarkiness of my response, but it still comes down to the same thing, which is, you know, I don't think about any of that when it comes to my borderline ex. I don't have, there's nothing that I think about. I don't wonder about any of it. I don't wonder about her. I don't wonder about, the length of time that she was with me. I don't, I literally just don't care. I seriously just don't care anymore about it. It was one of those weird things. It was like, a bad gas attack. It was, it was diarrhea. It's over, and I just don't care. And I believe that's because I really thoroughly did the work. Now, I wasn't with her for as long as some people have been with their borderline. It's also true I had 30 years of 12-step experience, and so I don't know. Although it was an incredibly deep experience, and my therapist said that while I was going through it, said, I hope this is the last bit of your mother that you're getting working through. And I think there's a possibility of that. So it just doesn't matter to me anymore. I just don't care. So I have that perspective when people ask these kinds of questions. They want to ask very specific questions about why my borderline did this specific thing. My first response is, what difference does it make? She was ill. She was mentally ill. There's no rhyme or reason to any of it, and it does sound, I hear what you say, Steve, and I think we spoke on the phone. And so I do recognize that you have done the work, but it still makes me wonder a little bit. You know, if you have completely healed, I can only have my experience to go off of. You seriously just won't care. You just won't care about any of it. And to be honest, it's making me wonder if I should keep doing the channel, because I just don't care anymore about borderlines and what makes them tick and what makes them do what they do. And I at the moment, maybe this might change later, but at the moment I just don't care. I don't have any pain associated with it. I don't have any unresolved questions. I don't have any, there's just nothing about it. So, you know, you say, I still don't get how my BPD ex had a relationship with her husband for 15 years and have 2 kids. Why did it take her so long to discard him? Although you say you've healed, and I believe that you have, there's still something there that's unresolved. Because if you had fully, completely resolved it, it wouldn't be something that you keep thinking about. And I think you've asked me this question multiple times, if I'm remembering correctly. So it does sound like there still is something there. And the answer that I give you now is the same answer that I probably gave you before. That person was more narcissistic than you. There was less intimacy, which made her chase after it longer. And it's, you know, it's sad to hear that, and it's sad to be thinking that question, because there's underneath your question is that you aren't good enough. What could I have done to have been better? Why wasn't I more valuable? And it still means that there's an unconscious feeling of not being valuable, and it's being manifested through this question of, why didn't the insane person who's incapable of love and intimacy, why didn't they want me more? Why did they want the other person more than me? So that's a very codependent question, and it still seems to indicate that there's some unresolved codependent trauma in there. You know, I look back at my borderline, and I'm well aware that this person was not there throughout the relationship. Whatever intimacy we had that I thought I experienced was pure projection on my part, pure transference on my part. She wasn't there. She didn't see me. You know, in my mind, I'm looking back in this memory, and I'm seeing the two of us sitting there, and I'm sitting across from her, and she's looking into my eyes and seeing me. And the truth is that that's not what she was seeing at all. If we were to go and look in through her eyes, it would be a completely different person. It wasn't me that was sitting there. She never saw me. She, you know, whatever intense feelings she had didn't have any depth to them, meaning they weren't going to last long. There was nothing that I did that gave her the experience of seeing me for who I was and seeing an individual. You know, whatever she said she liked about me vanished the moment that her feelings changed, and everything that she said she liked about me was pure projection. You know, she liked, you know, in fact, you know, she saw me as this giant, you know, and I'm not. I'm about, you know, 5'8" and a half. I'm stocky. I'm muscular, but I'm not a giant by any you know, any standard. But she saw me as like this 7-foot, 400-pound giant, and that was what she liked about me. She didn't see me. This was her fantasy she was putting onto me. And so was the negativity. Whatever it is that drove her away was completely her fantasy. So again, what difference does it make? What difference does it make how long they stayed or when they left? It means nothing. And the fact that you understandably want to ascribe some meaning to it means that you are projecting your shame and your feeling of lack of self-worth, and it won't go away, which is why you keep asking the question. As you say, I still don't get it. So do you get it now? She was with somebody that was more narcissistic than you were, and he didn't give her any intimacy, so she kept chasing after him. And again, that had nothing to do with him either. If that doesn't solve the problem, if it still bothers you, then it does mean that there's something that needs to be healed. So you say, I have healed. it kind of makes me wonder why you still watch my channel. I'm not trying to tell you to stop watching it. It's just, if somebody's 100% healed, they're going to stop thinking about this. And I'm starting to think I might be, because the truth is that I just, I'm saying the same thing over and over again, and I'm wondering if it's time for me to just let this channel, leave it alone. I'm probably not going to ever repeat myself. I'm probably just going to keep repeating myself. And since I don't want to get into it with people, my first response to every question people ask is, have you done the 4 things? That's my first response. Because that's what this channel is all about, in case you're new to my channel. What this channel is all about is doing the 4 things to heal. So what are the 4 things? Number 1, go full no contact. That means you make it impossible for them to contact you. 2, work all 12 steps of CODA.org or whatever 12-step group works for you with a sponsor. Then sponsor someone else. If you haven't done that, you haven't done thing number 2. Thing number 3 is work with a psychologist to take a look at your unconscious issues. And then 4, daily meditation, which is really just step 11. Those are the 4 things. Those are the 4, that's really the only thing that matters. All of the talking that we do about what makes a borderline and what blah, 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 all of that really, it's not that it's unimportant. It can be really helpful, but the whole idea of answering those questions is to get you to do the work. And what I want to share with people and hopefully give them the ability to have is the experience that I have, which is I just don't care anymore. I truthfully would completely forget about that relationship if it wasn't for this channel. And I did this channel in the beginning because I was in a lot of pain, because I really needed to talk about it. I'd never experienced anybody with BPD before. It was completely new to me, and it was, it's such a strange experience that you do have to acknowledge that you're not crazy. You just went through a bizarro world where everything was upside down. But what's underneath that is that you wouldn't have gotten involved with a borderline if you didn't have severe unresolved codependence. It wouldn't have happened. People who aren't codependent don't get involved with borderlines because they respond the same way that I'm responding now. When the first off, the borderline would never choose a healthy person. They're not attracted to that. They're attracted to people who mirror their unresolved pain, which is why they're attracted to both codependents and narcissists, because both codependents and narcissists have the same issue, the same underlying emptiness inside of them. As I said, borderlines are failed narcissists and codependents are failed borderlines. So borderlines are people who, if they had been neglected a little bit more at an earlier age, they would have become a borderline, which is why they're so attracted to borderlines, because the borderline expresses more completely their internal experience. So what you're seeking for when you chase after a borderline is you're seeking to fully experience the deepest pain within you, and the borderline recreates your unresolved pain. And your devotion to loving and healing them is your projection of wanting your parents to devote themselves to loving and healing you. And of course, the sad part is that it creates a hamster wheel that you never get off on. You do get off on it, and you never get off of it. So, yeah, my hope has always been that this isn't a channel that people come and watch all the time. I have other channels that I want people to get addicted to and watch. I want them to keep watching those. These are things that you can keep growing and learning on. But for me, I can only speak for myself. there's just nothing left to explore when it comes to borderlines. There's nothing more that I need to experience. There's nothing more that I need to learn. And the more that I learn, it all comes back to, have you done the 4 things? Whatever question you ask, I understand and appreciate it, but whatever question you ask can be answered by doing the 4 things. And so I don't want you to deny your feelings. Don't want you to deny your experiences. You should explore them for as long as you need to, for however many years that might be. Explore this and ask questions. But ultimately, all of the answers to all of your questions are going to come down to working on yourself and doing the 4 things. And sometimes there's questions that don't have answers, but they get resolved when you do the 4 things. All right, so it's interesting. There's some construction going on, and it's loud, but it's across the street, but it echoes, so it feels like it's coming in from under the house. And I keep thinking there's somebody in the garage, and it's like that. These unresolved questions are like that. They nag at you, and you can't figure out where they're coming from, and you want to figure out what is that noise underneath. And that's kind of what these questions are. So that's why my friend Steve keeps asking the same question. Why is it that she was with him for 15 years and had kids, but not with me? It's still an unresolved issue within him that he wants an answer to. So he keeps asking it. But again, ultimately it doesn't, when you realize that what somebody did has nothing to do with you, then you can stop asking. You can stop focusing on the other person. Because focusing on them isn't the answer. The answer is within you. The answer is why you picked them, not why they did or didn't pick you. And they didn't see you. They never saw you for who you are. So you can't get mad at somebody because they never knew you. They didn't reject you because they never knew who you were. That's one of the reasons I don't have any pain is because it wasn't personal. She still, if she even remembers this long, away from it, there's no doubt she's had multiple relationships that have, nuked and just been destroyed. I'm sure she's got a lot of bodies in her wake since she was with me. So she probably doesn't even remember me. But even if she did, whatever memory she has isn't me. Your borderline never saw you. They never saw you. That's maybe the saddest part. It means your parents never saw you. And the whole idea of, the Madonna and the child, Mother Mary holding the baby Jesus. That symbol is the symbol of the mother, who's looking into the eyes of the child. She has the slightest bit of a grin, which means that she's neutral. And all she has is love, and he's looking up in her eyes and he sees himself, and she's reflecting back to him who he is, so she sees him for who he is. And this is what you're really looking for, and of course you will never get that with a borderline. And the reason we choose borderlines is because we're trying to get our toxic narcissistic parents to see us. So there's just this deep infantile unresolved need that just never goes away. And so the only thing left is for you to see yourself. You do the work to see yourself, to love yourself, to accept yourself. And when that happens, you're not going to care. Especially with the borderline, you're not going to care. Because you'll realize that what you want, that you were just as narcissistic as they were. That you wanted them to be your parents, just like they wanted you to be their parents. And you'll realize they didn't see you at all. And your attempts to be as deep and authentic as you possibly could, and the belief, the fantasy that they were going to go, oh my God, this person is so authentic. This person is so real. I love you. I finally connect with a real person. I love you. That's your fantasy, and you were doing it with somebody that was missing that software. They don't have that software within them. They're incapable. Their response to a real, authentic experience is to destroy it. So it's good that you got discarded earlier. It means that you were more authentic than whoever they were with that they stayed with for a longer period of time. Christopher Nickel asked the question, does the sexual interactions between an NPD and BPD trigger the BPD to split, or are there sexual interactions not so much intimate or loving? Again, you're going to have to forgive me, but who gives a shit? What does that have to do with you? Are you an NPD? Why do you care what makes them split with somebody else? What difference does that make? How, if I explain that, how does that help you? Again, you're Christopher, you're on the wrong track here. You're under a delusion that your interaction with them meant something. What difference does it make? So sit with that question. Why is this important to you? You're obviously comparing yourself to a narcissist. Obviously. And it's obvious that what you want is what you think they have. So what you think is going on is that, and I know because I had a similar experience. My borderline ex would talk about a relationship that she had with a narcissist that went on for a long time, and he actually ended up doing all this crazy sexual stuff with her for years and years, with that ended up giving her all these weird crazy sexual fetishes. And I was so jealous that he got to have her for years and control her for years, and that she was giving herself to him for years. And I was so jealous of that. But the assumption was that they had something that I didn't have with her, that they had an intimacy, that she loved him. And none of that was true. It was incredibly abusive. He was abusing her. And so what ended up happening when she, during the last few discards, I would fantasize about becoming that kind of a narcissist. And I even said something to her along those lines of, I fantasized about doing this, 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 and this. And she would have said, oh, that probably would have worked. And I went, oh. And so after the discard, I found myself fantasizing about, pretending or becoming a narcissist so that I could have her. And that's what you're thinking. That's what you're asking. You wouldn't ask this question if you weren't wanting to figure out what you could do to get your borderline back. And it doesn't matter, It's not about them. The healing is about you. When you focus on you, you won't care. So the short answer to your question is that the sex between the NPD and the BPD is abusive. That he's abusing her, and she likes the abuse because the abuse reminds her of the abuse, perhaps sexual abuse, that she had as a kid. Why do you want to be that? There's no intimacy there. There's no love. You wouldn't get any enjoyment out of it. It would make you feel worse if you were to force yourself to become a narcissist. By the way, the borderline is trying to do two things to you. The borderline, part of their abuse is they're trying to trigger you into becoming a narcissist. They want you to either abuse them, or they want to create in you the desire for intimacy, and then they want to chase after that intimacy and then use that to harm you. So they either want you to abuse them, or they want to control and abuse you. So let's see, I hope I answered that question. Silently speaking aloud, it's been 23 years for me. I'm struggling to heal. Do the four things. Being damaged by a borderline creates a wound that never heals. Time will not heal it. As you're showing, 23 years. It triggers a deep wound that was created initially by your parents. and that wound becomes open to your conscious. You become forced to be conscious of that wound, but it doesn't heal. So you need to do the work. Do the 4 things. In my experience, that's the only thing that's going to heal it. If you don't do the 4 things, you are likely to be where you are, spend the rest of your life in pain. So do you want to heal or not? Imagine you've got a bacterial infection. It won't go away until you take some antibiotics. So go take some antibiotics and heal. Otherwise, you will be in pain for another 23 years. Christopher Nickel, question continued. I guess what I'm asking is, do BPDs not show displays of affection? Kissing, holding hands, cuddling. Why do you care? I don't understand why you care. I mean, it's obviously about you. You wouldn't be asking this if it wasn't about you. You're comparing yourself to a narcissist. Why do you care? Why? I mean, it's kind of, I mean, I'm not trying to judge you, but it's kind of weird and it's kind of sick that you're into there. It's like you're voyeuring her. You're voyeuring your ex with somebody else, and you're wanting to figure out, is he loving her? Is that what she's getting off on? What is it that she's getting off on? It's obviously that's what you're asking. Is she getting off on it? Is it because he was able to be intimate with her and not with me? It's obvious. So who cares? The bottom line is she didn't love you. That's what matters. She didn't love you. The fact that she may or may not have felt intimate with somebody else is completely, totally irrelevant. The sadness will not go away. She didn't love you. That's what hurts. Now go take that hurt and put it into step 4 of the 12 steps. And then you won't care anymore. And then you'll be in a position where instead of wondering what you can do to get this person to love you and see you, whether she's a borderline or not, instead of having that, you'll be in a position of loving yourself and finding somebody who can see you. And you'll be in a position of power. You'll go on a date with somebody, you'll see that they don't see you, they don't value you, you don't feel valued, and you'll say, it was really nice meeting you, but this isn't for me, and I wish you all the best. You won't be, so what do I have to do to get you to love me? What can I do to get you to see me? You won't care anymore. That's what I want. That's what I want to help you guys do. And I'm not going to be able to do it. As deep and amazing as I am, I'm never going to be able to give you what you need. What you're going to need is going to come from doing the 4 things. When you do the 4 things, you'll get all of your questions answered. You'll realize most of your questions are nonsense. You won't care about them anymore. And it'll take time. Everybody's different. I've been doing this for, 30 years? Yeah, no, 40 years. 40 years? I forgot. I've been doing this 12-step stuff for decades. So, it's going to take you some time. Okay, so that's it. Bottom line, guys, is there's nothing really more that I can say. I think I've said it all. Maybe I'll come back to the channel, check in. Maybe I won't. If I see an interesting question, maybe I'll respond to it. But when I saw it was Steve's response to me, I was so snarky with him. He asked a fairly intelligent question, which was, why did my borderline ex stay with her husband for so long and not with me? My response was, who gives a crap? Are you doing the 4 things? And while that's true, it really comes down to just doing the 4 things. It still is valuable to have somebody share and talk about some of this stuff. So it's kind of telling me I may be done for a while because I just don't care anymore about that. It's just, it doesn't resonate. There's a bunch of other stuff that I do care about. I'm very interested in what's happening in the world right now, which I talk about on, if you want to go check it out, you can go to my Odyssey channel, odyssey.com. Odyssey.com. And then you can look for my channel, Thunder Wizard, DOTCOM. I'm talking about all the craziness that's going on in the world that YouTube won't let me talk about. I'm really far more interested in that than I am in this at the moment. So anyway, I hope that helps, guys. Just go do the 4 things and you won't even need to watch my channel anymore. All right, I gotta go, and maybe I'll see you sometime in the future. I don't know, we'll see. All right, I'm sure I'll be back at some point. I'll see you guys later.